Cage matches have been part of wrestling for a long time, and there's been loads of different cage variations used throughout different promotions. The Big Blue Cage in the World Wrestling Federation, the War Games Double Cage in Jim Crockett Promotions and WCW, the Hell in a Cell, the WCW Triple Cage, the Punjabi Prison, the Thunderdome, Elimination Chamber, the list goes on. All these cages have something in common though. They surround the ring, or they at least let the competitors utilize the ring ropes, one of the most important things of any functional wrestling ring. Now, there have been cages used in wrestling that didn't include ring ropes, the Lion's Den for example, but the Lion's Den worked because it was built for Ken Shamrock and his MMA history, plus it was usually placed away from the ring in its own separate location. The WCW Asylum Cage, however, was not put in a separate location. Oh no. This giant bird cage was placed right in the middle of the ring, limiting the amount of available space considerably, while also taking away those ring ropes. And this bird cage wasn't developed for a legit cage fighter, it was developed for Scotty Steiner. Confused? Yeah, I wish I could say everything will get cleared up by the end of this video, but you're probably going to leave this one even more confused as you think to yourself, what was the point of all that? But let's see how it all played out on TV. This is WCW Blunder, the Asylum Cage Matches. Big Bad Booty Daddy Scotty Big Papa Pump Freakzilla Steiner was one of the more entertaining aspects of late WCW because the guy's filter was seemingly broke and he'd say pretty much anything that was on his mind while on TV. That little bit of thought processing that goes on before you speak, Scott Steiner didn't have that. And what we'd hear from Steiner on TV sometimes was nothing short of absolute gold, even if it didn't make a whole lot of sense. With his freaks, his peaks, and his fucking tagger, Scotty Steiner's character evolution was truly something to behold, even if some fans did miss the old Steiner of the late 80s to mid 90s. 2000 though would be the year when Scotty Steiner finally won the World Heavyweight Championship. Some would say it is too little too late, but it does show us that Russo had no issues pushing Scott and placing him right at the top of the cards. The Asylum Cage matches though took place before Scott won the world title, and in typical WCW fashion, it wasn't really explained why Scott Steiner needed his own speciality match, or why the cage was even necessary in terms of storyline. In fairness, the cage looked different and the visual itself was pretty good, not gonna lie, and I'm all for Scotty Steiner getting his own match type because why not? The blunder in today's episode isn't necessarily the idea of the Asylum Cage, but rather the comically bad matches that took place inside the asylum and how those matches were booked. I do wish there was an interesting story about the creation of this match type with quotes from Russo and Steiner, but there's nothing out there really. Even doing a search on the Asylum match type leads us right to TNA, where they too had their own version of the cage match, although the only similarity is the name. So we're just going to watch the matches, talk about what happens, and ponder over the business decision to hold these matches on TV when the WWF were destroying WCW in the television ratings. May 22nd, 2000, WCW Nitro comes from Grand Rapids, Michigan, Scotty Steiner's home state. We find even more blunder material on this episode of Nitro as Vince Russo holds a funeral service for Ric Flair's career, but we'll cover all this nonsense on Reliving the War in like 3 years' time. Can't wait. Anyway, Scotty Steiner comes to the ring and he says it's good to be home. Right here in Michigan is where Big Papa Pump first took his freaks to ecstasy, apparently, and he says this.
And all my freaks know there's nothing finer than doing the 69er with Scott Steiner.
Scott continues on by saying his friends have warned him he'll end up in jail if he doesn't straighten himself out. Steiner says he's been in the cell and he's been through hell, completely contradicting the last sentence, but anyway, he says he's always survived whatever's thrown at him, and from now on, wherever Steiner goes, the cell comes with him. I know, don't try to make sense of it. Steiner directs our attention to the ceiling and we see the asylum. Tony Schiavone acts all surprised, even though the cage was blatantly shown multiple times during Nitro's opening sequence, but yeah. Scotty says it's easy to get into the asylum, but in order to get out, you must say, I quit. Okay, so it's a submission-only cage match. Got it. The only way out is to give up. There's two dudes that Scott wants to get inside the asylum, his brother Rick and Tank Abbot. The genetic freak invites both guys to come to the ring, but only Rick comes down. So we assume it's a one-on-one asylum cage match between the Steiner brothers. Schiavone starts confusing viewers when he says there's no way out of this cage, even though Scott just said you can give up to get out, but let's see what happens here. The two start fighting before the cage lowers. The Asylum then slowly comes down and it surrounds both men, and it made me think, you know what I would have done here? I would have quickly ran out of the ring, let Scotty get locked inside the birdcage, throw some shit at him from the outside and then steal his freaks, but Rick wasn't thinking about any of those things, unfortunately. The competitors have lost the use of the ring ropes, and you can see the mesh has a lot of give. It isn't the tightest of cage structures, and it looks a little, I don't know, cheap. Scott realizes he hasn't got much room when he tries a suplex, and it looks absolutely shit. So he tries an overhead belly to belly right beside the cage, and it looks a little better. Before you know it, Scott locks in the Steiner recliner, but then Goldberg's music begins playing in the arena. We don't get Goldberg, we get Tankberg. What a genius play on words. He's holding a pair of bolt cutters too, but what Tank forgot is that there's no way into the Asylum and there's no way out. Those bolt cutters, fucking useless. Tank gives it 2 snips before giving up. So he punches Mickey J, he takes the controller away from the referee, and he pushes a big old button to make the cage disappear. Remember guys, the only way it ends is via submission. After a devastating, historic 3.5 minutes of absolutely fuck all, the first Asylum match ends in a no contest. Tank Abbott attacks Scotty Steiner, Kevin Nash comes down to help out Scott, and Vince Russo watches all this in the back while telling Jeff Jarrett, "It's such good shit, pal." So match number 1 was awful. It consisted of, 2 suplexes, a few bumps on the springy cage and a Steiner recliner. Steiner promised there was only one way out of his own personal cell of torment, and that was by giving up. But he totally forgot that the dude that controlled the cage was referee Mickey J, and Mickey J is no prison guard either. Surely WCW would take this idea, rethink their strategy, spend a little time to actually plan out a proper match, and build up the next Asylum match as something special. Absolutely not. The next match took place the following week and it was a whole 1 minute shorter than the first match. 2.5 minutes of Asylum action. That should make those pesky viewers switch over from WWF Raw, shouldn't it? Just for shits and giggles, I checked out what happened over on Raw on the 29th of May, the date of the second Asylum match. The WWF scheduled a Rock vs Undertaker main event, although it actually didn't happen, to be fair. There was also a European title match between Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero, and we also had Bill Buchanan taking on Steve Blackman. It wasn't a shit hot episode of Raw, but it still would have kept viewers hooked in. Nitro, on the other hand, with its 20 matches, promos and pre-tapes on this one night, was such a mess with their Jeff Jarrett vs Ric Flair main event, footage of DDP getting kicked out of his own house by his lovely wife Kimberly, and of course our second Asylum cage match. Big Papa Pump comes out and he says he's a genetic freak in heat, and tonight he's gonna do something special for all the ladies in Salt Lake City. He's gonna give them all a chance to get on the big bad booty daddy. They only have to do one thing.
And all you gotta do is separate your hips and put your ass out, and the daddy will make you pass out.
Alright, seems straightforward enough. Steiner announces he's gonna take on Tank Abbot at the Great American Bash, and that match takes place inside the Asylum. But tonight, Shane Douglas is gonna face Freakzilla inside the most unforgiving structure in the history of pro wrestling. Shane wasn't too eager to get inside the Asylum, but Vince Russo buttered Douglas up by putting Scotty Steiner's US title on the line in this very match. Now, even though this Asylum match was way shorter, it was still much better than the first encounter because both guys actually tried to wrestle in there, but it's still not what anyone would consider a good match. It's over painfully quick, it doesn't really get started, and because Shane and Scott actually try a few different moves, the limited space really gets highlighted. I mean, just look at this. I really can't see why anyone thought this would be a good idea, and I'd say it was probably a pain in the ass setting that cage up and raising it above the ring before the show went live. It's a lot of effort for 2.5 minutes of TV time, but there's really no point questioning these things either. WCW around this time period was just completely insane. Anyway, Scotty gets the win with his Steiner recliner. Take a look at referee Slick Johnson calling for the bell. Ring the bell, ring the bell, you stop, ring the bell, it's over, ring that bell again. Scott, let go, please don't hurt me. There's an episode of Nitro just before the Great American Bash, but unfortunately, or fortunately, there was no Asylum action in Atlanta, Georgia. A different kind of cage hangs above the ring tonight. It's WCW's take on the Hell in a Cell. This would get used twice on this evening, and not only did this cage hang above the ring, but also there was a big old bag of, quote, red liquid that would drench Nature Boy Ric Flair. No room for stupid Asylum cages when there's Nature Boys that need embarrassed on TV, guys, come on. On this evening, Scott had a pretty good match with Vampiro that, while entertaining, also included a ton of WCW nonsense as expected. Vampiro was getting ready for his Human Torch match against Sting at the pay-per-view, so he comes to Nitro with gasoline and a blowtorch, wanting to make Freakzilla a little crispy tonight. It doesn't take long for the match to spill to the outside, where Scotty does some serious damage, using chairs and slamming Vampiro on the announce table, but back inside the ring, Vampiro's able to take Steiner out by whacking him with his trusty blowtorch. Medeja hits Vampiro with a crossbody, and the crowd loved this, by the way, but then Vampiro stalked Medeja back up the entranceway while holding the blowtorch and gasoline. The Stinger comes to the rescue, Vampiro gets forced back in the ring, and Scotty wins with the Steiner recliner once again. It doesn't sound good, but against everything else WCW put on Nitro on this evening, it comes off as a 5-star classic. Tank Abbot, meanwhile, took a loss to Bill Goldberg in the next matchup. You may wonder why I'm talking about these matches and not skipping straight onto the last Asylum match. Well, honestly, I wanted to cleanse myself a little and talk about something different. I've watched around 6 minutes total of Asylum match madness, and already I don't want to watch anymore. There had to be something remotely interesting to look at in this video, so here's Ric Flair taking the bloodbath again. The red liquid bath again. Alright, let's do it. Great American Bash, a cornerstone of WCW dating back to Jim Crockett Promotions. An event that has a history filled with tradition, memorable moments, and unbelievable awe-inspiring matchups. And then we've got Scotty Steiner's big fucking birdcage. Tanky Boy Abbott better bring his A game to the Great American Bash because, technically speaking, Big Papa Pump's undefeated inside the Asylum. He's spent an extremely long time inside the birdcage, and the match has now become his speciality. My god. There's no Scotty Steiner promo before the match, so already this one loses points. Tank Abbott makes his entrance first. Out comes Scott with his freaks and his peaks. The big bad booty daddy lets his valets know he's gonna make this one as quick and painless as possible, and the match begins again before the cage has fully surrounded the competitors. Almost instantly, an announcement gets made. The ring announcer gives viewers some information from Eric Bischoff and Vince Russo, and I quote, "Since the Asylum is Scott Steiner's signature match, in an effort to establish an even playing field, Rick Steiner has been added to the match, making this a 2-on-1 handicap match." A signature match, that's hilarious. Rick Steiner comes down to join in on the fun, and I swear to god, it's remarkable how little happens in this bout. Scott stays on the mat while Rick and Tank wait for the cage to fully lower. The two kick Scott a few times while he's down. Scott then gets launched into the birdcage. He gets kicked again. He gets launched into the birdcage again. He gets kicked again. He gets launched into the birdcage again. Oh, he gets kicked again. Really, here's something different, an elbow to the groin. And then he gets kicked again, and it's time for the finish. Holy shit. Wank Abbott pulls a chain out of his crotch, and Rick tells Tank he doesn't need to do that. Rick showing a bit of mercy here, it seems, for his brother. So Tank ends up smacking the dog-faced gremlin with the chain, and this, of course, gives Scotty a chance to punch Tank in the balls, smack him with his own chain, and then lock in the Steiner recliner. That's the match over, 3.5 minutes again of absolutely nothing, and it's no wonder the match type got scrapped after this bout. At least they had the sense to call it quits. It's baffling how they thought putting another guy in there was a good idea, seeing the ring space was already severely limited. No more Asylum matches in WCW though, thankfully, and Scotty went on to bigger and better things. Alright, so I'm sure some of you guys may have thought this actually wasn't all that bad, and you'll want to put forward your comments and statements about why this was actually good, or at least passable. I hear you, and hopefully I can address some of those comments now that I pretty much expect after putting this video together. First of all, some may say it made sense for Asylum matches to end quickly because in a real cage fight, one wouldn't expect a fighter to last all that long anyway. Two things there, this isn't a real cage fight, and I hope I don't sound like a dick when I say that either, but when you buy a ticket to a pro wrestling show or you switch the channel to watch a pro wrestling show, you kinda expect to see pro wrestling and not MMA cage fighting. The guys in the cage wrestled, at least they tried to wrestle. They didn't pretend to throw stiff shots or try to make things look like an MMA fight, so that argument doesn't really work. Secondly, I don't even think WCW were thinking about how a real cage fight would play out by limiting the time, because Nitro matches during this era were incredibly short anyway. Take for example the night of the first Asylum Cage match. That match went 3.5 minutes. The match before that, Mike Awesome vs. The Wall, went for 1 minute and 25 seconds. The match after, Chuck Palumbo vs. DDP, was 3 minutes. Some of you might say that the cage actually looked different and at least WCW were trying something new, and I would completely agree with you there. We joked about bird cages and all that stuff, but it was something we hadn't seen before, and it looked pretty unique during arena shots, so I'm with you on that one. The visual worked. Some of you may think this was all really done for Tank Abbott with his MMA history and it wasn't really built around Scott Steiner in the first place. Yeah, you probably could say that, but Tank also lost his first and only Asylum match, so I'm not sure how it benefited him in any way. Finally, some may say to me to stop being such a picky bastard and just have fun with it. It's only a cage in the ring for fuck's sake, and you know, I try my best to have fun watching pro wrestling, and even when things are bad, I can still have a laugh. Really, this whole Blunder series is all about laughing at some of the more silly things WCW put on TV, but Asylum Cage Matches simply were not fun to watch. The most fun I had putting this video together was when Scotty Steiner had a microphone in his hand, and I really mean that. It's incredible how these matches are so short, yet you still want to skip over them or move on to the next segment. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that there were no plans made for how the bouts would actually play out. There's guys out there who would look at this monstrosity and still think of a few creative spots they could do inside, outside, or even on top of the cage. There has to be something there. But it seems like the plan was, yeah, do whatever you can, just end it with a Steiner recliner and that'll do nicely, bro. I really do hope and I really do like to believe that it was Scotty Steiner who put the kibosh on these matches. I can just imagine Scott threatening to shove a baseball bat up Russo's ass if he books another Asylum match ever again as long as he lives. Still, I guess all's well that ends well. Steiner did end up winning the world belt towards the end of the year, and the Asylum cage was turned into scrap metal, so it worked out fine. That's going to do it for this episode of WCW Blunder, and thank you guys so much for watching. I do appreciate it. We're coming up to the end of the series. I'm going to end it with 10 episodes and then maybe move on to something else. The WWF or WWE have had quite a number of slip-ups in the past, and maybe those deserve to get highlighted a little, so who knows? Maybe WWF Raw is Flaw or WWF Whackdowns next on the cards, I don't know. But we still have a few WCW blunders lined up that we need to look at. For the final episode, I want to give you guys a chance to suggest what should get covered. I have 3 episodes in mind, but I also don't want to miss something that you guys really want to see. So leave your comments and let me know what WCW Blunder you want highlighted to close out the series. You can also tag me on Twitter with your suggestions too, at Wrestling Bios, so send them in and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching this one, guys. Again, I do appreciate it, and take care.